Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. I am Ariel Silver, the program manager over at the SONA Foundation. We are a charity, a 501c3 organization created by songwriters for songwriters, and we support our fellow songwriters creating resources and programs in mental health, financial wellness, and career development. We are fresh off a really exciting week here in Los Angeles. We just hosted our first inaugural, I guess that's the same as the first, right? Our inaugural Wellness Fest. It was a whole day dedicated to mind, body, spirit well-being for songwriters and the greater community. And next week, we have the fourth in our Music and Money series, which is part of our financial wellness programs. If you would like to find out more about the programs that we offer, please do make sure that you browse our website, and even better, subscribe to our mailing list, which you can find right on the website. And I will put in our chat box a quick, easy way to subscribe to the mailing list. Today's conversation, as part of our monthly Fireside Chat on mental health with songwriters, is about family conflict and estrangement. And this is a topic that has been coming up a lot lately. I don't know if it's just in my feed or if others have been noticing it too, but this is a topic near and dear to my heart. And also, I think for a lot of people, especially right now, as we are in the middle of the election season here in the US, and also, of course, at the very beginning of the holiday season, this is sort of when that conversation and when those types of conflicts maybe get a little heightened or heated. And so we are really lucky to be able to partner with Backline. I'm going to bring on Terra Lopez, community manager over at Backline, to have yet another conversation about a topic that's not uncommon for just people in general, right? And as songwriters, we have our particular ways of navigating this world, all the worlds where our professional and our personal lives kind of mash up through our art and, for some, performance. Hi, Terra.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited for this important conversation. Like you were saying, I think a lot of folks are feeling this time of year. So I think it's
absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm not gonna take up any time here because I really want to get right into the discussion. So I'm gonna leave you to introduce our guests for today, and I look forward to just sitting back and hearing what you all have to say. Take it away.
All right. Well, I'm Terra Lopez. I'm the community manager and head of artist partnerships at Backline. And like Ariel mentioned, we have a very special fireside chat today. Want to introduce Backline. As most of you probably know, Backline is a resource hub for the music industry, and we provide the industry with as many mental health and wellness tools as possible. And we've teamed up with the SONA Foundation for these very special fireside chats to talk about mental health for songwriters. And so today we have some very special guests. We have Naomi Sommers. She's a singer-songwriter who grew up playing folk, jazz, bluegrass with her brother and parents in a family band. She's played all over the world as a singer and a multi-instrumentalist, and now teaches and performs music in Ithaca, New York. Over the years, Naomi has played on over 20 records and has recorded 3 studio albums of her own. We also have Malarie McConaha, a singer-songwriter and band leader of the FBR, an Americana roots rock band. Mallarie's captivating stage presence draws audiences in with her bold delivery, and she's received praise from American Songwriter Magazine, American Blues Scene, and many others for for her incredible performances. And lastly, we have Backline Clinical Director Ari Jacobson. Ari is instrumental in growing our clinical network of vetted mental health professionals in our efforts to provide mental health and wellness care to music industry professionals and their families. As always, Ariel will be moderating the chat box, so please feel free to drop any questions you might have, and we'll make sure to get to them. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And so I want to welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining, loving the background of the fire. Today we're talking about, a topic that can be kind of heavy at times. And so really want to appreciate and let y'all know that this is a safe space to talk about family conflict, estrangement, and the many, many feelings that can come with that. But first off, I love to start these chats with just checking in and asking how y'all are doing today.
Doing good. Wow. Enjoying fall.
Yes. So excited for this time. Naomi, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well today. I would say I'm a little curious and maybe a little nervous too about talking about this topic, and curious how it will go with your facilitation, and but also like really excited to be here and do something different in that way.
Again, really appreciate your, openness and willingness to talk about, again, like a topic that is pretty tough. I personally have experience in this as well. And it's definitely, it can bring up a lot of emotion. So we'll work through that together as much as we can. Ari, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I love these conversations. I'm always excited to be a part of them. As Naomi said, I'm just excited to always kind of see how it happens. But this will be an interesting topic for sure. Definitely not an easy one.
It's not. It's not easy. And I guess we could just kind of ease into it. And, Malarie, Naomi, I'm meeting you for the first time right now on this conversation. So I guess wondering if y'all can kind of tell us a little bit about the structure of your family. If you have siblings, step-parents, kind of what that dynamic is.
You want to go first, Naomi?
Sure. Cool. I have one younger brother. My parents are married still. They've been married for 47 years, I think. And I'm married, but I guess like part of the reason I relate to the topic has to do with the fact that I'm separated from my husband, or like get in the process of getting divorced. So there's estrangement on that side. I have 3 kids who are 9, 12, and 14 now. And that's simple, basic structure of my family.
Yeah, my family is, I grew up with a sister and a mom and a dad, and my sister and I have different fathers, but she was raised by my father. And my parents divorced, both are remarried, and I have a relationship with my dad, stepmom, and 2 step siblings. And then, the family just kind of split into essentially in our scenario. So our immediate family, we don't have contact. Like my mom and sister and I don't speak, and my dad and I do have a relationship still today. So.
Thank you both for sharing that. I'm wondering what the conflict looks like in terms of interaction or communication. Malarie, you mentioned that there's no communication whatsoever, but just kind of wondering what that looks like.
It just really kind of came down to a point where I saw the writing on the wall that it was going to be essentially one side of the family or the other, and the amount of strain I felt like it was putting on me as an individual, that I didn't want to have to pick between you know, a bloodline. That's how it felt like for me. And ultimately, it was just a decision. It was a hard one. It's been two and a half years. And that no contact really does just look like, you know, I blocked people from social media. Either of them can still text me, but for about a year, I had their numbers completely blocked from my phone. My family and friends had to, you know, say, look, she's not in a place to talk. That's why she's not reaching out. And it's been tough. I don't know what the future looks like, you know, but it's been day by day. But I just know that one day I realized that it was leaching into the life I was trying to create. And I didn't want to feel that way anymore. I you know, creating my own life in music. I'm married now. And yeah, it was a tough decision, but that's where I came from.
I can really relate to setting those boundaries with your family. I identify as queer, and when I came out, my father was just he had no room for that, no tolerance, and so I really had to set boundaries and do the same thing. You know, no communication, block, and it was really difficult. But also, I had to live authentically. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to set those clear boundaries. Naomi, for you, what does that communication look like? Yeah.
Well, I have my whole story is like a little bit complicated or everyone's story is, but I had a lot of family conflict growing up, like between me and my mom. And so I feel like to be kind of general about it, like I learned a sort of fighting way of dealing with the conflict with her. And then in my marriage, that created its own problems because I married someone who's so different from me and his family culture, as you could call it. Like they didn't fight. They didn't have problems with each other. They like didn't express a lot of things the way I expressed it. So I came to this marriage relationship expecting something more similar to what I grew up with, whereas that we could like express things and figure it out. Although I mean, with my mom, it was very painful. We didn't express things in a positive, healing way a lot of the time. But with my husband, it ended up that communication kind of like broke down because we just didn't have we didn't have the ability to understand each other. And it was just really painful for many years. And also I was at that time we were living in Germany and for his job, and that's where my kids were all born. So we were away from like any network of my own family and friends who could have been there at, sort of, or his family and friends too, like to kind of help. So it felt like we were like in this world of our own, trying to figure out how to just kind of survive. And eventually we came back to the US, and that's when I realized that like for my own mental health and for the mental health of my kids, like that I needed to just not be in this relationship anymore. So it was not like a easy thing because there's still a lot of love and we've known each other for a really long time. But I felt like the reason I chose to separate was like to end conflict, because like if you're not trying to be together but yet can't, there's not as much to fight about anymore. So that was about 3.5 years ago. That brought a lot of peace for me. And since then we've been figuring out how to communicate like as parents outside of a relationship. And I would say it's a weird thing. The word estrangement is, I do feel like there's estrangement now. Maybe that's what happens in a divorce, even if you're still talking, because we are trying to communicate as best we can for the kids and be healthy parents for them, like in the way that we can in each moment. We're just learning and working on that, but we're not, I would say like we keep the communication minimal. so that we don't hurt each other more. And it's really very complicated and tricky for me to figure it out. But ultimately, I don't know. I think that we're doing okay, but I don't know. It's a new thing. Also, like I said, my parents stayed married. I had the conflict with my mom, which created a lot of strain. But my parents that almost unified them more as I went out of the house. Like they kind of are really close with each other. So I haven't really been close to a divorce. So I don't even know. It's a strange thing. I know that can tend to be something that runs down in the family, but like I almost feel like I wish I had known people who got divorced, because I don't know how it's done. And trying to figure that out.
That's a lot to kind of, go through on a daily basis and try to navigate. What do you both do on a daily basis to take care of yourself, to take care of your mental health, for self-care? Because these situations can be very heavy.
I started playing tennis recently, and that was exciting.
Right.
And now I'm obsessed. That's the I have to go every day, at least for like a half hour. I don't like working out, like just going for walks and stuff. Like it just feels like punishment. I don't know why, but to me, I'm just like, this isn't fun. I'm not getting dopamine from this. But for some reason, tennis, I don't know, just like, I think since getting on that journey and realizing, because, that's the thing, the complicated family dynamics is there's a lot of things that I picked up in all of those moments and in the traumas, and that trying to shake loose those habits of survival and getting back to a place of like, oh, I'm living and enjoying. So like learning to enjoy tea. I like never thought I liked tea and coffee. I just went straight to like the worst energy drinks. And so instead of trying to always be like, I'm not going to have this, and almost be like, hardcore parenting myself, I'm like, try tea, go play some tennis, try something new. And that's something that I wasn't doing when I was stuck in those like cycles of bad communication, So
Love that.
So like taking the space from your family helped you put that more energy into yourself.
Realizing how much time was lost my entire 20s almost. Because as you guys probably all know, when a big event or a trauma happens, or a big family dynamic blowout, whatever it looks like, it's not just that day. Like it takes a while to recover from that. And so, you get into autopilot mode and you go, oh, I have no time. And days and weeks fly by, and it's like now being able to enjoy a full day, being able to, have time to do all the things you want to do, because you're not just sitting there in this like grieving pattern, like the cyclical fast one, not the long-term actually processing grief. So I think the healing journey is I'm still at the beginning. I mean, I'm 2 years in and I still feel like I'm at the beginning some days. But I do see light finally, which is awesome. I mean, that's a good thing,
Yeah.
Naomi, you've had time. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. I was going to also say like the decision, like for me, the decision I was the one who said I want to get divorced, and maybe for you, like deciding to not talk to your family members, like I feel like making that really hard decision is also a step where even though the grief starts then too, something shifts about that, you did that what you needed to do right then and there. Now you can move towards the healing. When you're like in the limbo or the pain or the conflict that comes before that, the inner conflict, that feels really hard. So I feel like I have for the last 3.5 years since I made that choice been like had the time to learn so much about what I actually need and where I was abandoning myself previously along the way. And some of the practices or things that I do to take care of myself, like for me, walking is I like Yeah, everyone's gonna find what actually feels right. It's kind of cool to not think of it prescriptively, right? Like,
Yeah.
I like that because I think I was feeling alone in my home. So when I'm walking, I know I'm alone. It's like, this is my time alone, and I'm gonna just not feel bad about it. I'm gonna think my own thoughts and not taking care of any kids, then just be out here like seeing what comes into my head. I also really like writing in my journal every morning. I write about I like ask myself a question about, especially if something hard happened or I behaved in a way I didn't like, I'll like kind of ask why I did that, and in a way that I can't do when I'm just thinking. Like a different answer to that will come out when I'm writing. That's been very helpful for me. And I also really like listening to music, and I seem to be able to like cry or have grief come up when a certain song, and it'll be like sometimes a different song that I am listening to obsessively for 1 or 2 weeks, and then I'm done with it. And there's like,
When it stops hurting so much because you've just done it so many
yeah,
times. Yep. Yep.
yeah.
I
I
should
like
have
how
known as a little kid I was gonna be a songwriter, because like I would do that. I would just be like, I'd play that Reba song to death,
yeah,
in skill one, or I was that kid so bad. Like, even now
yeah.
I do.
That's so cool.
It is cool how music and art form at all it is a catharsis, because I think sometimes your feelings can be really overwhelming, and it's like when reality feels a little too real. Um, it's easier to like pour yourself out in a song, or like by listening and being receptive to emotion. Um, I can listen to a song that's just sad about anything, and whatever needs to come out of me is going to come out of me, which is nice.
Yeah, same with me.
Ari, we have talked about setting boundaries a few times already. For those that are watching or will be watching the replay of this, how can individuals establish healthy boundaries with family members during times of conflict, whether it's, zero communication or setting boundaries on like these these topics are completely off limits? And how can folks do that in a healthy way?
It's a tough one. I would always say that the only thing that you can actually control are the decisions that you make. So recognizing first off that in many of these family conflicts, regardless of what the topic is, whether it's a lifestyle choice or a political or personal belief, that just it's not, or it's just a general disagreement that you and other family members or people close to you just can't seem to agree on. The first recognition is that we can't change the other person. We can help them understand. We can influence certain things, but we can't force this person to change. So the first boundary we kind of need to set for ourselves is the recognition that I can control what I can control. From there, language is really important. It's not always necessarily what you say, but how you say it. So being clear, not being vague about needs. So when you do this, I feel this. Also, it's a hard thing in many cases, but being really kind with your language. So almost being overly kind and just like, I'm going to be very honest right now and I'm going to be very clear. Because if I'm not clear, then I'm worried I'm going to say something I don't appreciate, or I don't mean, or I don't want to say. And then, as both of you have already mentioned, or as we've kind of already talked about, just recognizing when you're spinning your wheels and you're not really getting anywhere. Take some time away, and it doesn't always have to be like we're not going to talk for a while. You can say, "Hey, we're at dinner right now, and I'm going to walk away for 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes we're going to come back, and I want to talk about the weather." Setting something very deliberate as like, we're here and I want to make sure that we have this time together, but I can't address this any further, and actually physically separating yourself. Or if it does get to the point where it is too much, separating yourself for a period of time, whether that's hours, days, years. Ideally, you want to be able to have all the important people in your life, but at the same time, you got to focus on yourself, what's best for you. And if that's focusing on yourself and not having that other person around, then hopefully that's something you can work on later down the road.
Mm. Malarie, Naomi, or go ahead.
I think that's definitely so true, and it's a tough decision ultimately in any relationship that close, because you want those things. You want to, I long for healthy relationships with all of my family. But that was something that it took me until I was 27 to learn, was that I can't change them, no matter how much I make myself available, however I bend. Like, I'm still me, and nothing I do is going to change that pattern. It's like that whole, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like, moving states away and starting my life, like, I was like, everybody used to joke, like, she became the peace-loving hippie, because I did. I literally moved out to the woods just outside of Nashville, in this tiny artist community, and life got drastically better and happier. And I'm like, guys, it doesn't have to be like how we were raised, but also talking to people, just like, these weren't normal things that most people were dealing with in their childhood. And a lot of it was generational, you can call it curses or whatever, but generational patterns that weren't breaking. And for me, I think that, like, I don't know what that looks like if it's forever. I used to say I'm never going to, but then you go through a grief period. And but I think that in the long term, those relationships, there's so much that, like, would have to change. And just even, like, in minimal communication, like me not responding, but, like, I just don't see what has changed. And it's not political or, driven, or because, like, my dad and I could not be more polar opposite on politics. But the thing that there is respect and love. And I'm not afraid to, like, say, Dad, I don't agree with you on that, and we've learned to have, like, that healthy conversation. But I know I'm not going to change him, like, he is a grown man set in his ways. But I do think that, like, same with me, like, I have values and stuff that that's kind of the practice in the rest of my life. I think it's when it comes down to it, is, like, not accepting behavior that makes you feel, for lack of better terms, like shit about yourself. Continuous, like, making you feel like you're not worth anything as a human. And those cycles have to, break. And, like, I was guilty of playing into it. It's like the enabling, conversations and stuff. But breaking those patterns and saying, I would prefer to, like, do something good with my day today instead of feed into drama and feed into darkness. And if you don't want to get help, if you're not willing to get help, there's nothing else I can say or do. And I was so afraid to say that, like I said, till I was 27. And for me, it had to be a harsh cutoff, because, like, I needed time to heal and process. And I was in therapy, and I was trying to learn what that could look like. And ultimately right now, it's just like, I am enjoying my peace. And, maybe one day. And that's the thing that a therapist talked to me, because they're like, don't keep saying forever. Like, you don't know. But having that peace now is really nice. So
that's incredible that you were able to break that cycle and separate yourself by literally moving states and to gain that clarity. And I think that is sometimes what does need to happen for individuals to be able to focus on themselves and be able to focus on, like, what you specifically needed to heal. That's really incredible that you were able to do that.
And I'm sure, like, as you were talking about that whole finding a community thing, or as I was talking about, I'm sure you can relate, like, when you go through that with a parent, like, when they don't see eye to eye at all, it is so hard, especially when it's something that is so innately you. And it's like, I can't change this. This is absolutely who I am. And you can't, when there's foundational differences on that level, like, my big thing is acceptance and tolerance. If we can start there, I don't expect you to understand why I am the way I am, who I am, any of those things, but I expect you to accept it. And I would like for you to give a crap enough to understand it.
Yeah.
And it sets a tone when you can do that with parents, with every other relationship in your life, whether that is complete blocking out, because there are things that, in my opinion, are unforgivable. There are things absolutely that are just, there is a line, you know, and it's each person's job to decipher what that is for themselves, you know. I can't sit here and say what that line is, but yeah, it's interesting.
When talking about songwriting and songs like you both were earlier, do you write about these experiences and how you're feeling, or is that off limits? How does that kind of come through in your songwriting?
I want to say a quick thing about what Malarie was saying too first, but with my mom, I think it's really one of the amazing things about you, how you're prioritizing yourself now, and is like that I have felt this with my mom. Like I've always just wished that she would understand and give me what I needed, and like wanting that, and then finally realizing like that she was not ever going to see that she wasn't giving me, that she was not supporting me in certain like essential ways that I needed to be understood. And saying, and I when I realized that, which was like in the last couple of years and having this time for myself to do a lot of healing and reflection, like I wanted to go tell her, hey, guess what? Like this stuff that happened in my childhood, this is why I have these issues now. I mean, not now, but like in my marriage, this has like caused so many problems for me. But that, and of course that wasn't the way that I said it. I was really not trying to blame her, but I was like, I've recognized things about myself that are really because of triggers that I have due to experiences in my childhood. And it was very hard for her to hear that it didn't go over the way I hoped it would. And then I realized after that I had a period where I didn't talk to my mom for like 6 months because I said, I'm like learning about how to have a healthy relationships, and this doesn't feel good. I guess what I was trying to say is like that there was like a part of me that realized she's never going to give me what I need or recognize that thing that I missed and that like I'm wounded inside because I feel like I didn't have, but I can give that to me now. And I can make sure that if I'm in a close relationship with someone else, that they see who I am and what I need. And if they don't, now I know, like, I don't need to ask it from them, like someone who's not willing or able to hear it.
Compromise too, I think, with yourself and with the relationships in your life now is saying, just not having the expectation anymore, not having because if you continue to, it's something, it was a great thing I heard about where it was like, when you say phrases that are like, I can't, or I won't, or I don't, that's coming from a place in your brain. Like I was saying one time, I don't want that drama in my life. And my therapist, she was wonderful, said that right there. And it was right after I blocked communication and just was like, I just don't want this in my life. She's like, okay, we're going to start with words right there. You're right. You don't want it, but you are choosing to no longer allow that into your space. And taking that power, there was such much, like more of a calm, or like I want and I need statements versus like you learning you can give that to yourself, like that validation, the things like that, and pass that on. I don't have any biological kids of my own, and I don't plan on having any, but I see the need for that like mother nurturing kind of thing, just in the village, like helping other people. And that's pretty cool. Because it is tough. Relationships with mothers especially are as a woman, like, and as a little girl growing up, that was something that you are different people. Like I just learned how to curl my own hair at 30 years old, which is crazy. Like I was sitting there with a curling iron forever, just like getting the little like kinks in your hair not the right way, and learning I was probably a little more girly than I gave myself credit for, but it's kind of cool. But so you were talking about that with your mom, like, do you feel, because I feel this often, like that cycle of the fighting, my stepmom recently said this to me. She's like, when I saw you and your dad fight for the first time, like our big blowout, she's like, me and my kids had never seen that before. And I was sitting there going, that was really tame too. Like, that was probably one of the most tame, like, I felt, yeah, we yelled and I walked out of the house, but like, it's gotten a lot worse than that. And so that was kind of a wake-up call for me recently, realizing, you know, it was like compared to what could go on at times. And in my relationship, I don't know if we've had struggles, you know, and it's taken 10 years of me kind of repeating a lot of broken, like almost the projection and things like that, and to realize that you know, I don't want to live that out anymore. And luckily, like in my situation, I have changed a lot, and I'm very much still in love with my husband. We just got married this year, actually, after being together for 10 years. And there were some times when I didn't think it was going to work because I couldn't get those like patterns out of my life and that angst. So, and I feel like I started noticing in all relationships that I was really bad about setting boundaries and wanting to people please all the time, which made me resentful, which made me avoidant. So, yeah.
I noticed like from that I was very afraid of people not liking or approving of things I did. That came from my mom, like, because she kind of needed me to love her, and if I seemed ever unhappy, she thought I didn't love her anymore. So I realized that affected any relationship where somebody might think, oh wait, you're not doing quite the right thing for me, like expressing a need that they had. I would worry that meant like they weren't going to be there solidly with me and be able to talk about it. But yeah, Pat, like I think we just have so many patterns of communication that we don't know. They're like unconscious until they become conscious, and then you see them in all of the different how they've affected all of the different relationships.
And then in writing, I guess we were talking about the writing. How do you feel about that? Because that is definitely something that I think some artists struggle with.
Yeah, I don't think I could. I've never written a song about my conflict with my mom, or about the things I've learned in the past few years and how I've healed, which I think I really have in so many ways. So big. And also it's like, I'm also still pretty close with her, and she is to my music. Like it would be, I think I've shared pretty much everything there is to share with her. So in a way, that part isn't the scary part anymore, that she would hear it, but or might hear it. But it's, yeah, it has. I guess you have to take one part of it, right? You can't explore that whole topic all at once. But I have written things about the marriage, or about, and somehow that seems easier. Pain in a love relationship maybe it's totally different than the kind that comes with the parent. What do you think? Do you write about this?
I, in the last couple of years, finally did. And it was probably about 4 years ago, actually. So it's a song that I didn't know what was going to happen with, called Caught in the Crossfire. And it's honestly more about my mom's story than it is mine, and what she experienced, and coming from a place of empathy, and of, you know, talking about that generational chain, recognizing that we pick up these weapons and refuse to put them down once we're safe, because you're terrified things will happen again. And Caught in the Crossfire is very much about that. But I did even face backlash on that side of the family further down the line, because I told my aunt about a song, and through the grapevine, somebody got really mad because they were like, is this painting me in a bad light? And I'm like, no, like my goal is not to make anybody be painted in a bad light, but at the same time, like being able to speak my truth and speak that lineage. And, you know, I've been torn about that, because like you've said, the first thing you don't say is, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I write music, and I am estranged from half of my family. Now, there have been times when I've met girls and like gotten deep by the bonfire pretty quick. Don't get me wrong. You find those people that it's like, oh, let's, and you talk about everything and anything in one night. But like, that is such a hard thing to do. And yeah, I definitely struggled finding out, I was coming into this with like the lack of family support. I was like, not knowing what exactly we were going to talk about, and like, oh, I'm going to come in with these things I've read on, an NPR article or things like this. But then like to actually get into what we've been through is interesting, because it's like none of us can explain in a short amount of time the depth and the width of our stories, and context is everything, I think. And, so it's little snapshots. So with the, the songs and stuff, like I think as an artist, that's helping me lean into being more authentic, but I'm trying to do that in a place where I recognize I am far from a perfect human being. I've hurt people. I've done everything wrong. And my views on my family conflict are not coming from a high and mighty place, but more of a place of survival, so that, I can live with dignity and live with peace. And I think that's the goal. So with the art, though, I had writer's block for so long because I was so afraid to write about stuff. But as a teenager, that's how I got started. There'd be a big event or drama going on right downstairs below me, and I would be sitting in my bedroom writing a song, trying to think of any rhyme I could. And for a long time, I leaned away from that. Like, I moved to Nashville to be a songwriter, and there was like a 6-year period where I did not write a song. And that was pretty terrifying, because I've only been here 10 years, about 2 years in. And here and there, I'd get an idea or pick it up, but I was always afraid. And my husband's helped a lot with that because he's like, you're very introspective when you write. He's like, we should storyboard sometime. And like, it changed songwriting for me because I'm like, wait, like I can pull an element of truth from this thing that I went through and pull this from over here. And just because I'm writing about it doesn't mean it's 100% true. I can pull from this experience and pull from that experience. And at the end of the day, you really don't have to answer to anybody for your art. So I would say if you're feeling it, man, go for it. Because this song, I had no idea. And the band all wants to cut it for the next record. And I'm terrified and excited at the same time. I'm like, okay, like our first record, Tim wrote a lot of the lyrics and I wrote music. And this time around, it's like, okay, this is going to be cool. So
that sounds awesome. So you feel like when you were having that writer's block, that was also like in the time leading up to this kind of separation?
Yeah. Well, I think the writer's block is a large in part because it was like just a tumultuous cycle of, okay, I got to wake up today. I was emotionally wrecked for the last 3 days dealing with this. Now I've got to self-heal and music for a while, because I was here doing it and pursuing it. I felt like I had to put on a happy face, and suddenly it didn't become it wasn't the catharsis anymore. It wasn't where I went to express myself. It's where I felt like I had to go put on a mask and be happy. And learning to separate those into like lanes, boxes, however you want to put it. Like, yes, I don't want to be sad and depressed walking up to a fan that just came to my show and paid lots of money. I'm going to smile and I'm going to be happy. But like, when I walk into situations, I don't have to overshare, but I also don't have to just pretend that everything's perfect and everything's great at all times. And writing is helping do that, because it's like, being open and aware and present in the moment can really help not only yourself, but everybody around you. And getting out of that conflict, that's what did it for me. And I feel creative again. I feel like a day lasts a long time again. I'm not just on autopilot. So.
That's amazing. Ari, for folks that are listening and tuning into this, and we have the holidays coming up, the election coming up, which can bring up a lot. What strategies can individuals utilize when it comes to protecting their mental health and well-being around family if tension does arise?
So the theme that has kind of popped out today of this conversation without even really anticipating it is the idea of taking back control over the narrative that you have. So especially as we are going into these more stressful time, this time of the year also with just the weather changing for those of us who are in weather changing climates. This also happens to be a time where our mood can fluctuate because it's getting darker earlier, it's getting colder out, and now also we're going to spend, in theory, a lot more time with family members who could really stress us out. So it's kind of a perfect storm of just stress that's happening all at once into the turn of the year. But as you go into these, it's really okay to kind of try and take as much control over the situation as you feel you really need. So have the boundaries of what you're going to talk about, and what you're not going to talk about. Plan topics in your own mind of what are some good talking points that people might actually want to have a conversation about, whether it's about a new song you wrote that has nothing to do with the political climate that's going on right now, or it's about some new, I don't know, some gym that you just joined that had something funny happen. Like, go in with intention of saying, I'm going to control the conversation and dictate how we're going to start these conversations to try and avoid the negative interactions. It's also really okay if somebody brings up a topic to say, like, listen, now's not the time and the place for that. I'm happy to talk about anything else, but I will not talk about that right now. And then to reiterate it by even saying, like, I'm not trying to, you might get some kickback, and it's okay to say, I'm not trying to be or cause issues. I'm actually trying to avoid them. So I'm just going to choose not to do it. And then the biggest thing, and this is a really common technique for people who are maybe trying to stay sober during the holidays and are trying to avoid a really negative situation, plan an exit strategy. If something happens and you're getting to be too much and you've tried your coping skills, you've tried your breathing techniques, you've separated yourself into another room and you've returned, but nothing has seemingly changed, and you feel that the next step really could be something bad, even if it's just an argument. If you're there with somebody else, have a common word that's something silly. It could be banana, which banana means like, I got to get the hell out of here. And you just come over and be like, hey, did you think they have any bananas here? And then the person goes, oh, it's really time to go. Nobody knows your schedule. Your schedule is your schedule. And if something comes up, then that's okay. The biggest thing going into this, we've been talking a lot about kind of these ongoing, we've referred to them as traumas. And as we experience traumas, our body will tend to disassociate and remove itself from that type of situation because we don't want to actually handle it. At least right now. We can handle it later down the road, but for right now, we need to package, compartmentalize, and avoid. The longer that we allow those little traumas to happen, the less of ourselves that we're going to start to feel because we're packaging more of ourselves and putting it off to the side. So the sooner you can kind of take grasp of all that, take it back into control and process some of that trauma and kind of feel like you have more control over it, then the more of yourself you're actually going to start to see come out. And that's where some of that creativity also can kind of come. So in the event of these types of situations, especially in the bigger holidays that are happening right now, put yourself in the driver's seat. And it's okay to be in the driver's seat.
I love that. Plan an exit strategy. Also have a code word. That's so important. And, it's really just like tangible things that you can take with you.
And the code word should be like, okay, we're leaving. We're going to go to Chick-fil-A to go get dinner. And then we're going to go take a walk around the block. Like, it shouldn't be, all right, we've gone. What do we do now? There should be some sort of plan for the next couple of steps, and then you can go from there. But you just want to know that once you have removed yourself, if you need to, because the likelihood is you're going to come out activated at worst, that you want to know that you already have the next couple steps already planned so that you're really good to go.
We do that for parties and for just general social events because both my husband and I are 50-50 extrovert introverts. So like we're there and we're excited, but then we get there and we're like, oh God, what now? And it often is like go for a drive, listen to Pink Floyd, stop and get our favorite like fast food beverage, and so yeah, that's great. I never thought about applying that to the holidays too, so that's awesome.
Yeah. And my wife and I are the same thing. I'm very much excited to be a part of the party. And then the second I'm tired and ready to go home, I'm like, let's get out of here. So we've been using those kind of like little words and stuff for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Love that. Malarie, something that you said earlier really stuck with me of how you're no longer on autopilot and the days are longer. You're seeing this light finally. What advice do you have for folks who maybe aren't there yet and are still, kind of riding that autopilot and feeling a bit, overwhelmed? What advice would you give? How did you get there?
You're not going to heal in a day. And that is, you're not going to fix it overnight. Find small things. You might not even see the light for the time. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months. But I guarantee if you drink that bottle of water, the headache will go away. Drink your water, girl. Anybody, I'm terrible about that. Also, take the magnesium, take the bath, do the self-care thing. Do the thing that feels like the luxury that for some reason you're telling yourself you don't deserve. You do deserve it. Start there. Because you won't get creative. You're not going to get back into the flow of life. You're not going to find the things that really bring you the zest unless you can start with the small things. So start with the small things and the big things will come. So that's my advice. I don't know if it's worth anything because, I'm still on that journey, but I that's helped me. So,
yeah,
I think that is incredible advice because it is really tough at times to feel like you are deserving of that, of that self-care. And so just kind of remembering, take it day by day, allow yourself to have those moments.
Your cup has to be full and overflowing or it will drain because whether it's your kids, your friends, your family, your colleagues, everybody's going to need things from you. And that's always going to be there. So even on the autopilot, if you feel like you're empty, that's why you do those small things because eventually it will be an outpouring. It will not be a draining thing. Very important.
I would say one thing that I was thinking about with what Ari was saying and also what you're talking about now is letting go of the expectation that someone else is going to change. I think we talked about that earlier in the hour, but I think that's the main thing that brought me to the place where my whole sense of life itself changed when I was like, oh, my mom is not going to ever be the mom that I thought I don't know why I thought that she would be, but part of me just always still wanted her to be able to be like, oh, can I just explain this to you? And then you're going to say, oh, I'm sorry that was like that for you. She's never going to say that. So something, I don't know. I think in that way, it was maybe like a kind of one day shift where finally I was like, oh, so I can grieve that I didn't have that, but I still want to also be who I live this life that I have and figure out what will make me feel good. That's not her. It's not wanting that from her. And that's maybe the same when it goes into meeting family for the holidays. Think about the expectation. You probably know how it will go, how certain people will behave beforehand. Just remember to expect that from them. And then, like you said, then you can prepare what your plan will be when that happens.
Yeah.
But also with my mom, when we stopped talking for a while, when we did start talking again, it was my cousin, who's a psychologist, helped us both come up with the idea that we could, first of all, start with very short amounts of time together, but then also each plan, make a list of what we don't want, what's going to hurt to bring up, what we don't really want to talk about together. So we kept it. I shared my list with her, please don't comment on this. And let's, this type of thing. If that comes up, I can't do this. We can't spend time together if these certain topics keep coming up or are approached in that certain way. And we both wanted to talk. So we agreed and understood what the other one's wishes were in that. And that allowed us to start slowly hanging out together again.
So yeah, what common theme for this conversation is set those boundaries and kind of be unapologetic in that, knowing that is going to be how you can preserve your mental health and sustain, which I think it can be really difficult, but the rewards of that are pretty immediate, I feel.
Also for the people who can't go home, especially musicians, because at the end of the day, we all understand how this industry works and holidays can be tough and you never know what's going on. Don't be afraid to reach out to your network and community. Because whether it's because you can't go home or you just may not want to some years. Sometimes you want to stay in wherever you're at, reach out to your friends. Friendsgivings are amazing. Going and spending that time with other families has been healing for me, because it's also helped me see like things that I just was like, well, wait. I'm like, a lot of this is actually normal family stuff. Like, families have the hard dynamics between politics, religion, all of the things. And so, but don't be afraid to reach out to that network if you can't get home to your own family, because they're there. And it's been some of the best holidays I've had. I've had Thanksgiving here in Tennessee for the last 10 years. And never have I gone home for that. I still go home for Christmas. But Tennessee, it's always spent with friends and their family. So don't be afraid to find that, you know.
I love that. The concept and idea of your chosen family, I think, is so important for musicians, especially who don't feel like they can go back home.
Yeah.
So that's a very important reminder. Thank you so much for that. As we're, wrapping up this conversation, I want to be mindful of the hour. I just want to thank you all so much for coming on here and being so open and vulnerable about your own family conflict and situations. I know it's not an easy thing and it can bring up a lot, but I think this is so helpful for others and will be so helpful. And just kind of hearing like you're not alone in this, that alone, there's so much power in that. So just really want to thank you all so much for your time. And Ari, thank you so much for giving us some tangible resources and ways to handle conflict in real time. So folks, remember that code word and remember an action plan for that code word, for that exit strategy. That is so important. Again, just want to thank you all so much for sharing.
Absolutely. Thank y'all. And I'll thank you guys for the work you are doing with Backline. It's really cool. I learned about it at Pilgrimage Festival a couple of years ago through somebody with Music Cares. And it's pretty awesome, because as artistic people, sometimes it is really hard to advocate for ourselves in the health system, let alone the mental health system. So Music Cares helped me out just getting health insurance, because I was so stressed about all the paperwork. They made it so easy for me, and use the resources. They're there for a reason. So thank y'all.
Yeah. Thank you all for doing this.
Thank you all so much. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I wanted to leave Ari on here for a minute before we wrap up. Yeah, there was a question that came in about navigating experienced loss, the grief of experienced loss. And Naomi spoke a lot about that regarding her mother and accepting that, accepting the fact that she wasn't going to be the mother, or wasn't going to mother her in the way that she had needed that mothering when she was younger. And there's a grief that comes along with that. Ari, I was curious what, if there's anything that you have in your toolbox that you bring to these calls that you could offer to address that.
So this is one of those times where I would say that this is a really big thing to deal with, and it's a lot that can really be there to unpack and to be able to sit and we already kind of talked about the idea of taking control over your own narrative, but I think to be able to like journal and write out what your expectations are and kind of start to pick apart your own expectations as, what do I really feel like I need? What do I want? What do I think? What do I feel? So kind of your 4 different emotions with that. And as you start to kind of process out which bits and pieces of it are really bothering you, or you have the conflict or those sticking points, then start to kind of identify with those, are there any ways that we can resolve some of those? So we're taking this big problem, we have to make it into much smaller problems. This all being said is a much bigger, like I would always tell people when you've gone through this type of emotional grief or really emotional trauma, like this is a really great time to involve a professional, because this is not going to resolve itself over one conversation. It's definitely not going to resolve itself over one day. But it's the biggest thing that I can put out there is that all of this can be resolved. It just needs to take some very intentional conversations and some very intentional evaluation of your own expectations, your own emotions, and your own emotional responses. It's easy to plan for the worst and hope for the best. It's not always so easy to respond to the worst when you don't get the best.
Right. And that's actually quite optimistic what you said, that it's not easy and it's not going to resolve quickly, but especially with the help of a therapist or some kind of help in that way, it can be resolved. And that to me is really optimistic.
Yeah. I think also sometimes recognizing that nothing is going to change, and that sometimes we experience something that's been really terrible, and just coming to the recognition that you experienced something, or you had this really awful relationship, but it was not the relationship that you caused. It was brought to you. This is the hand that was, for lack of a better term, dealt to you. Sometimes taking that emotional resolve and saying, I did nothing wrong. I unfortunately did this, but look at how far I've come, even despite what has happened to me. And you kind of shift that lens to looking at the successes that you've been able to manage despite the downside of everything. That's kind of how you can start to see that resolution and take better control over it.
Yeah. And Malarie also mentioned how a couple of years ago she wrote a song about this topic for herself, and she seemed like she was a little surprised at the way that she wrote the song, but it was more about her mother's story, or empathy toward her mother. And I wanted to say that I had the same experience many years ago. I was trying to untangle my fraught relationship with my mother, and I decided to write a song, and it did, in the same way. It was, let me try to see what things might have been like in this fictionalized setting of this construct of a song, which, the other thing about songwriting is that it's economical in words. It's really small. And Naomi mentioned, this is such a big thing, and a song is like a 3 or 4 minute thing. And maybe there's some relief in that as well, as songwriters, trying to take this giant mess that's such a jumble of tangles, but just try to take one little tiny part of it, maybe the other person's perspective or something like that, and see what happens.
And for the sake of time, because I know that we're short, for those people who aren't able to write a song, and you don't have the creative juices to kind of get it going, there are a lot of really wonderful like grief workbooks on Amazon that are just prompts, that are just like, when I feel blank, I can do blank. And if that's what you're going to start with, then at least it's a good tangible resource to at least get yourself going, and then you can break away from kind of the guided stuff.
I love that. Ari's Amazon grief workbook list. Thank you so much, Ari. Appreciate that.
Of
and
course.
I know that we're short on time for you, so I'll say goodbye to you. Thank you again.
Bye.
And Terra, thank you again for once again, bringing such thought into your questions, and drawing these stories out, and helping. There was a really lovely chat box happening, and some really important questions, and I know that folks are going to watch on the replay as well. So I thank you once again, and we're going to do this on another topic next month. So I look forward to that one.
Oh yeah, this was a really beautiful conversation, a difficult one, as some of our fireside chats are, but I always leave feeling seen and heard. And I hope our guests feel that way as well. Especially with this topic, I think, something like you said, writing a song, I too, and trying to figure out the perspective, like Malarie mentioned, I have a number of songs from my father's perspective, my mother's perspective. And I do think it's a part of trying to maybe humanize them and see them outside of the parental role.
Right.
And for me, at least, it has given me a lot of solace in kind of seeing them as the human first, parent second. And that a lot of healing has been brought from that experience. So like, write a song, or like Ari was saying, find those grief books. I think it's so important. And Naomi was talking about journaling. I think just finding your outlet, some way to kind of assess how you're feeling about things, I think really helps that healing process.
Yeah. When you said, human first, parent second, it brought to mind the idea to me of like the Greek gods and the Roman gods, and, how we're born into the world believing that we are the center of the universe, and that we are the child of gods, and there's that moment in time for, I think maybe all of us, but certainly many of us, where we see our own humanity, and yet we still hold our parents in that, God realm, and to bring them into that human realm and say, yeah, you've got your own struggles, and you were raised by humans as well, this generational thing. It's it's quite a journey, this human experience, right?
It is. And that's why these conversations are important, to kind of work through all the messiness that being a human is and contains.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Terra, and I look forward to next month's conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. I want to just say thank you all for watching, for listening, and to remind you that here at the SONA Foundation, we have the Therapy Assistance Project, which is the TAP grant. You can find out information about that on our website. And this is a grant specifically for songwriters who need financial assistance in getting therapy. So hop over to our website, SONA Foundation, and you can find out about the TAP grant. And also we have a link directly on that same page to Backline if you want to connect with them. If you don't need the financial assistance, but you just don't know where to start to find a therapist, and meeting up with someone, whether it's on Zoom, virtually, or in person, they have this vast network of therapists, and they work specifically with folks in the industry. And we over at the SONA Foundation are specifically here for the songwriters in our community. So thank you so much for listening, and hope to see you next month for our next Fireside Chat. Until then, take good care.